everybody. Welcome to another Random Code stream. Gotta move the camera. This is the coding position. The other one's the gaming position for the camera. Let me turn on my music so we get that going. All right, so extra stream because it's Labor Day today, so I have off. And I consider this relaxing, even though it wasn't very relaxing yesterday. I ran to a bit of a snag. Operations are fun in .NET analyzers. The problem became with this argument value to the attribute, which needs to be a string array. To get that out proved to be, hey Mitch, proved to be quite the endeavor. How do you want to do this? Yeah, so if you try to create the array this way, then it's an array creation operation. And they have to look at the initializer and element values, and yeah, it's a whole lot of fun. If you do it as a collection expression, conversion operation, yeah, there's no consistency to this whatsoever. And it took a while just to figure out what all the operation types were. But get filtered properties. Operation value. So the first thing we want to do is say if value is that, and I'm just going to write this out as I would with ifs and elses, and then let Visual Studio give me a potential better way to do it with like patterns and expressions and all this stuff. So we can say here else. Should never hit that. All right. So, if we get this, actually, we need to yeah, I figured it would do that. Okay. So if it is this, then we can say our initializer operation is equal to array creations operation initializer and we're going to assume that's actually we could just do this then. Why not? Converting null literal or possible null value to non-null. Oh, for God's sakes. Oh, wait, is that what that is? It is an IArray initializer operation. Okay. So we could say for each var element value in element values. We'll assume that's that. Is a constant member covered by one of these operations? Public class example, const string. Well, this is when you're putting an array into an attribute. So there was only a couple of choices that you can do. You can either say that is equal to a new string like this, or a name, or the collection expression, and then if you're passing in a name of, or a constant, or a concatenation, there's like name of operation, literal operation, and binary operation. Those are the ones I can think of. If you can think of more, let me know. I actually have to get one of my kids up. They asked me to get them up at 8. So I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, back. I need to have on that those break and ending screens I've been adding scenes to keep the desktop audio going, so there's something playing in the background if I'm like playing a game or something. Anyway, so I hope that explained the path I'm going down here. All right, so forget element value. Switch element value. Oh wait, no, it's properties.add name of operation. Constant value. I have the feeling I'm doing this very wrong. And then this. Okay, what am I doing wrong here? Oh, these all have to be stringed. Now what? Possible null reference argument for parameter item. I always get this wrong. Shouldn't that all... Oh, wait a minute. Well, I had to do that. That was a miss on my part. Okay, wait a minute. Let's pull this out first. Okay, fine. For null or possibly not null value. Oh. Okay, see, sometimes helps to do that. All right, so let's do this. There, now it all works. And then we do the same thing here, except in this case, it's this. And it's the operand. Where's the operand? Yeah. We need to say as elements. There. And so now we do the same thing here. Yeah. And so then down here, we should be able to say get filter properties of that. This needs to be 2. There. There. It'll all work now. Hey, hey, hey. So, if we get back to where I was yesterday, which is this, I was going to try to say this should be fine. And it passes. Hallelujah. What about this one? Hey. Hey. And now these should pass. Oh my God, that took for freaking ever. That was, if you saw the stream yesterday, I got pretty frustrated over this. All this, trying to get the, using operations in analyzers, and when you run into attributes and you're trying to pull out the values, especially when it's an array, holy God, did that get complicated. It's basically this, because it can be an array creation operation, it can be a conversion operation. And if it's a conversion operation, it also can be a collection expression operation. Isn't that obvious? Ay, ay, ay. This is the same in both spots. So, you know what? We could say static string get element value, because this is an I operation here and this is an I operation here. And then you could pull this up here. Excuse me. Aye. And then we could say here, get element value of element value. That's much neater. Local methods, when I first heard of that being added, that was, I don't know how many versions of C# ago, but when I heard them being added, I'm like, this seems kind of weird. You know, I thought it might be useful in certain cases, and then can you make local methods to local methods? And you can. So I've got a local method that is this local method, which is used here and here because that gets rid of some common code, puts it in one spot, but it's only relevant to this method. And this method is only relevant to this method. I like local methods. I can see where they could be overused, but I also find them to be, when you run into them, it's very helpful. So I like that. Okay, now we are doing analyzer tests. I think we just got that done. Integration tests. That's what led to all this. So we have excluded. Oh. Yes. We want the agent ID, so we just want name here. We want to exclude that. There we go. It hasn't caught up, but it built. If that makes sense. And now they all pass. Look at that! Look at that. Let's do the shutdown, start up again motif. We're now running into the case where it thinks it's an error, but it's not. It actually is working. It's a little annoying. Yeah, it's like it's saying, it's not generating any files. Yes, it is. I know it is. Isn't there a way in Visual Studio to say, like, force run all the... whatever. It works now, so... Finally got the analyzer working. Alright, and that also... This is for target AutoDeconstruct. We also want to just do it for AutoDeconstruct. Sent the snippet on Discord of what I meant. Well, let's look. Yeah, I see what you're doing. Okay, so you're saying if you had a const and you put it in there, what would it do? Let's find out. No better time like than the present. Let's just change one of these to being We'll have one of these as const string age name, which is equal to age. And then I put that here. Test space dot test dot age. What would that do? It fails. Damn it, Mitch. Mismatch between number of diagnostics. 2. Type of operation. Invalid operation. I may not have the syntax right here. Field reference operation. Okay, fine. But it should be actually pretty easy to do. We can do, of course, I don't know which one it is. Well, it would be one or the other. It doesn't matter. If I say here, I field reference operation. Boom. Okay. Thank you, Mitch. I do appreciate you picking that out. It actually is a valid case. But once I had that all set up, adding it into it. You got any others? Huh? Got any others? You can't do a function call, I know that, because this has to evaluate to essentially something that's constant. And so you can't, if you could, well, that still wouldn't help my problem of doing dynamic filtering names. But yeah, that wouldn't work here. So yeah, I think I've now covered all the cases that you possibly can. But if I need to add another one, I know exactly where to add it, right here. Because there's only 2 ways that I can think of that you can get the array, unless... No. Because you can't do a const array. I don't think you can. Like... I can't say public const string values equals 1, 2. Because it's going to say that's not... Yeah, that's not constant. I can say it's a static read-only, and that's fine, but I will not be able to put that up here and say program dot values. That won't work either. So that's not a... Under attribute argument must be a constant expression, type of expression, or array creation expression. So that covers all the cases then. All right. I do like the help from the audience. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, and you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet, please subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, so any new subscription helps. If you're already subscribing, thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. It doesn't use name of directly, but within the member. Yeah, and name of is already covered here. So you have to pass in an array. So it's got to be either an array creation or a conversion. And then once you have the elements, those are just I operations, and then it's just a matter of what's in each of the array element positions. And it can be a name of, it can be a literal, which is just the string, it can be a concatenation, or as you just showed me, it can be a reference to a constant. So So yeah, I think at this point I've got all the I think I've got all these covered. Though I don't like the naming of this to like I want these two strings to be different, because otherwise it makes it a little bit harder to figure out type of element operation, type of filtered property. There, that at least has them be different. Yathra, I hope I said that right. Hello, good to see you. Sorry, you've done enough damage as it is, Mitch, already. And I'm kidding. I mean, you actually helped out a lot by that, catching out. What am I doing? I am building. Well, the intent. Let me go back to the here. So this is a source generator in C# that allows you to basically put on a type AutoDeconstruct, and then it will automatically add a deconstruct method for you. So then you can create an object and then deconstruct it here, and it just works. The thing I've been adding is a way to do filtering. So you can say, it looks like kind of like this syntax. You can say I want to include only these properties, or I want to exclude these properties. So that's what I've been working on, and I'm almost done. That is it. Yeah, for now, Mitch. I do think, though, we've covered all the cases. I think at this point, all of them are good. All right, so let me go back to my list here. The unit integration. I've got the target audio done. So we want to add in. Let's just say, grab that name. So take target off. And then crap. Through the magic of file type renaming. Here we go. Simple. All right, so we kind of want to grab these types, except we're going to change them. Be static class, and then we're going to take the target off of these. And so then we want to just let's call this customer here, and then included customer, excluded customer, except over here, let's name these to get the assembly out of it. So we're just going to say target customer, target included customer, and then target excluded customer. There we go. Okay. So then we can put on here, we can say auto deconstruct. It just works. Nope, not that. And then here we want to say that we're doing included filtering. Like that. And then here we want to do excluded filtering. Like that. Do you also do any other languages? You know, At this point, not really. When I this quick rundown of all the languages I've ever done in my life. When I was in 7th grade, so I've been like 12, that's when I was introduced to computing. Math teacher had an Apple IIe or whatever, and I started doing some simple basic programs. I actually didn't think I'd be a software developer, even though I realized really quickly that computers were definitely going to be a thing in life. So, in retrospect, when I went to college, I should have gone for comp sci or math or both, but I went into engineering. But I started also doing some C programming there. And then my first job out of college, I did Visual Basic, I did some Java, then I moved to C#, and then I did some, JavaScript as well. That was before everything really took off with JavaScript. I didn't like JavaScript. I still don't like JavaScript. So I don't like weakly typed languages. I like strongly typed languages. And at this point, for pretty much everything that I do, C# fits the bill. So I'm not saying it's a perfect language. I'm not saying it doesn't have issues. It's just, it works. It works for me. So that's one I pretty much focus on these days. So, all right, now we need tests for this. So we can kind of copy and paste these, except we will change these. We'll just say, because these are just now, they're just customer, yeah. So we're going to say customer here. And then included customer. And then excluded customer. And if everything works, boom, it all worked. So that's good too. I think we're getting close to finally calling this one truly done. Commit 24, integration tests. I was happy this morning. It must have got rain last night, so I didn't have to go out and water the lawn. Or at least set the sprinklers out and keep moving them around my lawn. So, it's the little things in life. All right, so we've got all this working. I think we've covered all the cases. There were a couple here that really don't have to do with this, but I'm kind of curious as to what happens. What happens if you add the attribute more than once with different filtering characteristics? Like, who wins? And then what happens if you put a property name in the filter list and that property by name does not exist in the target type? Or what happens if you put in duplicates? Putting in duplicates, if somebody's going to be a jackass about that, I could change that to when I'm adding them to the filter properties. I'm going to put that in as a note because I can do that real quick. Use a hash string. And I can't put that in the attribute, but I can put that when I'm just saying, give me the unique ones, and then we'll move on from there. So that takes, if you put in duplicates, we just ignore them. And we only use the one. To ensure uniqueness, and then if so I guess what would you like if I did this in my code? And of course you'd want to use name of, because for good reasons you want to put a string in here. But let's say I put in like that. Does that break anything? I know it doesn't, because it just takes that and it says, well, okay. In what language is that? This is C#. So if I put that in there and it's actually not the name of a property, would you want to get an error, you know, and say that there are not all properties match, or does that matter? I don't know. You know, because that would be I put that in there to expect that I'm filtering this to include it, but then nothing happens, and it's because you didn't match on a property to include or to exclude. This is why you would definitely want to use name of. Out of everything you're doing, even a const, you'd still want to use a name of, because that is resilient to changes and errors. Like if I change this to age 2, that is now, oh, okay, well that, I was like, why is that not erroring? It's because I did some bad things, and I was, so we're including and we want to exclude here. Okay. Hee hee. Okay, but if I put 2 here, see, now that errors out because it says, well, that's not a definition. There's no definition for age. That's why I'm like, you'd want to use name of here. So I'm kind of like, it's also a vacation day and I'm being a little bit lazy, and I'm like, well, what would happen here? What would happen if I did this? Well, oh, that's right. Okay, I forgot about that. Allow multiples false. So with this version, you can't do that. There is only one definition of that attribute allowed on a type. So that's covered in that case. This isn't. So if I did this and I said exclude, well, what's going to happen now? Yeah, chaos. Absolute chaos. So I think I think I'm just going to let the compiler do its thing. What happened there when I added the assembly level attribute targeting the same type twice, what the generator ends up doing is I don't have a way to specify a unique model. So if I go back to the generator, what's happening is that it creates 2 models, type symbol models. Those are types I've created out of this for attribute with metadata name. And we end up getting 2 models that are targeting the same type. And they have different characteristics. One's including filtering, one's excluding. And so we get down to create output, and I don't do anything to say, are the types the same? I just let it happen. And so what ends up happening is I create 2 source files with the same name, because this is based on the name of the type that you're targeting. And then it just went nuts, because it's like, well, you have you're trying to use 2 file names that are the same from a generator, and that's not allowed. And then it started having all sorts of other errors. So I'm kind of like, no, I'm not going to try to test for that. I'm going to let the compiler do that. And if you did that, you know, that's why. It may not be obvious, but I'm kind of like, you know what? There's only so much I want to check. So I think with what the compiler infrastructure is going to do, in the case for this one, can't happen with AutoDeconstruct, as that is 1 per type. If it's done with target AutoDeconstruct, a compiler error will occur. It has two files, the same name, on generation. Okay. Since we're in college and we're studying coding and programming, any advice? Run. That was being silly. It's advice. I mean, career advice, studying advice. There's a lot of places you could go with that. When I went to college, again, I didn't focus on computer science. I was on engineering. When I went to grad school, that's when I started to realize, yes, I really, really want to be a software developer. And I don't know, part of me was just, I studied and I learned and I spent time on my own reading books, and when I was in college, that's when the internet first started being a thing. I remember in one of the labs, there was a computer that they dropped a Cat 5 down and there was Netscape on it. And I just was enamored with it. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. So many people are writing web pages and this is so interesting. So I was just learning. I just spent a lot of time just trying to learn, read different books on programming, all that kind of stuff. That was 30 years ago. I still read, whether it's a book or an article or whatever. I've always held the adage and the notion of you should know how things work underneath the scenes, at least to some appreciable degree. Now, they teaching us in school using C. I don't know why colleges do that. I remember when I was in college, when I was a freshman, they were teaching us Fortran, and I'm like, why? That was so dumb. I could see teach somebody using Python or JavaScript or C#. It's something that I think is used by a lot of people. C, it is, but it's not a very common language. So anyway, when I went to college, I had the fortunate opportunity that my senior design project was actually building a chip. So there was a tool that we used that we could lay out the chip design, and then we sent it off for fabrication, and we got a chip back. So I learned a lot about logic and gates and actually connecting all these things up, and so I mean, I got about as low of a level as you possibly can get and actually literally building a chip. There's all these levels of abstraction. There's, if you look at assembly code, that's actually an abstraction over literal machine zeros and one code. The mnemonics, the add or the JLE or JMP or those instructions. Those are just shortcuts to the actual literal hexadecimal values that those incorporate. And then you have languages like C that we're trying to get above assembly code. And then you have languages like Java and Python and C# that are abstractions over that. Now you can say, well, now LLMs and AIs are going to make it all natural language and we don't have to worry about programming languages anymore. I don't agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying that won't happen, at least to some degree, but I still think at the end of the day, the architecture of a computer hasn't really fundamentally changed in a while. Yes, there's definitely been advancements, but it's still ones and zeros flying all over the place. We don't have quantum computers yet. That would be a different story. But I mean, yes, there is quantum computing, but it's not large-scale commercial. It's still very, very much research-orientated. So my opinion is just learn as much as you can. You're never going to hurt yourself if you actually decided, you know what, I'm going to spend some time learning assembly language. And there would be nothing wrong with learning C. There's nothing wrong with learning just general architecture guidelines. So my advice is learn as much as you can. I've never, as long as it's not bad advice. Of course, what's bad advice? That's hard to say, but pick up books that generally people in the industry have said these are decent, good books. Even then, there are some that I don't like Clean Coder or whatever those. I don't like that book. But in general, there are some good ones out there. Read them. They're helpful. Actually learn how to program. Don't just say to an AI and say, build this for me, because then you don't understand what it's actually really doing. The analogy to me, and it's an analogy, it breaks down, but the analogy to me is somebody who can repair cars knows the engine, knows, especially a good one. They know how brakes work. They know how an engine works. They know how a muffler works. They know all this stuff. And so they can diagnose and repair your car when it has problems. And they know the inner workings of it. I don't. I mean, I know there's an engine there, and I know electric cars, it's now a lot different and stuff like that. But if you know what you're doing, when my house, this room that I'm in, my office, half of the downstairs in our house was not furnished. So we contracted out to a company that basically put all rooms into this area, and that cost me money, but they knew exactly what they're doing. If you ever watch somebody who knows how to mud and tape, oh my God, what could take me weeks would take them hours, because they know how to do that, and they know how to do it very, very well and fast. Electricians know what they're doing. So to me, it's like, just learn. It's there's so much out there to learn, and you're going to stumble, you're going to get confused, you're going to be like, why does this work or not work? But just keep plowing forward. That to me is what's, the fundamentals. I know it's like, that helps. So just reading it. To take a long time for AI to be good at physical tasks. Yeah. So being a plumber is a good bet. I'm not saying don't be a programmer, but there is something to be said for other trades. I get very pissed off when I see people treat people in service industries like waiters or people that work at grocery stores or anything like that as beneath them. That really irks me a lot. That's menial. That's simple. Well, maybe, but they're still doing a job. Don't treat them as any less of a person. That kind of annoys me. Same thing with people that work in like construction or do, kind of trade tasks like welding and stuff. If they don't weld correctly, bridges can fall down. So maybe give them a little respect. It means we're cooked. Well, yes and no. I mean, take it for what it's worth, Sky. I get your point, but you are going to learn at least something about programming. And maybe you're not going to be programming in C, but that's the thing too, that if you learn other languages, even if you don't program in them on a consistent basis, if you just take the time to learn another language, you may learn a concept or an idea that you didn't know before because another language doesn't have it. So there's that. Just like Guy said, it will transfer over. So, that can help. Assuming that it's going to explain it to you correctly. And again, I'm not trying to be negative against AI. I just, I personally think, knowing what the truth is, knowing what is actually really correct, and that can be a little bit hard and ascertain, but it can definitely be helpful. I'm not trying to put it down. I'm old also, to not rely on your classes and professors. Go and learn your own. If you're studying JavaScript or Python, go learn from them now in conjunction with your college courses. Professor teaching stuff you're forced to learn on your own. Your customer, if you don't feel like getting money's worth, find another professor at college. There's that too. It is disappointing sometimes when universities just don't move ahead. I know some universities, I've heard, they do a lot of, your coursework is submitted as a repo on GitHub or something. And, they actually teach like unit testing and not just programming, but things that are required or needed as a software developer. How do I use source control? How do I write tests? How do I set up a build process? Those things are important too. Sometimes universities still, to this day, get stuck on, using old languages to teach data structures. And to be fair, data structures are perfectly fine. In fact, I think you should know those. I don't know them as well as others. And I think, again, there's nothing, you're not going to hurt yourself by learning, how some of the details around lists and queues and trees and all that other stuff. You never know when that can really come in handy. Oh, I just use a list of string in C#. True. I'm not looking at the inner workings of it, but it can't hurt, but Guy's right. I think you owe it to yourself to not just rely upon what a teacher or an instructor is telling you. Branch out, and learn what you can on your own. That will help. How do I do all the stuff that comes before writing the first? How do I do all the stuff that comes before writing the first line of code? I don't know if that's a question to me. I know that you're not asking me, Guy, because I know you know that. But how do I'm not quite sure what you're getting at with that last comment, Guy. But anyway, so hopefully that was somewhat helpful. I mean, I get that from this question occasionally. Sky, I think, is getting a little bit deeper into it, but where do I start? How do I become a software developer? How do I, what's the right thing to do? I've been doing this for 30 years and I still don't know if I've been doing it right. Just do something. You're gonna fail. Accept failure. That's okay. In fact, I tell people you're gonna learn more from failure than your successes. And that's what's gonna make you successful. If you don't allow yourself to fail, if you feel bad about failing, if other people make you feel bad about failing, screw them. I mean, you got to get rid of that mentality and just be like, that's okay. It's okay. As long as you learn from it. Why did this not compile? Why is this test not passing? Why did this break in production? Hopefully that never happens, but it does. Learn from it. And that's actually a great teacher, is just to go do that. Like, here's a random idea. Do the advent of code. If you don't know what advent of code is, so let me bring that up. Advent of code. So this was from 2024. So this is adventofcode.com. And you can go to any year you want. So, there's from 2015 to 2024, and these are all just like puzzles. And, some of them get a little bit hard. Some of them, usually the first 4 or 5 in a year, are not that bad. But just pick any programming language, one that you're familiar with or not, and, do some of these, and don't use AI or LLMs to do it. Try to figure out these on your own and see if you can come up with the answer. So I would highly recommend something like Advent of Code. And that can help to push you to see how do you have to solve some of these problems. System analysis and design. Yeah, what was really beneficial for me in both high school and college was internship programs. That's true too. That can definitely help. That's another option. Make sure your school has outside connections. Yep, that can help. I work at Rocket Mortgage, and we, since I've been there, I've been on teams that we've had 4 or 5 different interns, and one of them is actually, I think, probably now at this point going to become a full-time employee. So getting that experience can definitely help a lot. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of free training, free problems, stuff like that. Thanks, sir, and the other guy in the comments. I will continue learning. Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's the reason I keep programming is because I like solving problems. I mean, that's also why I picked engineering. Because to me, it's always been this: here's a problem, how do you solve it? And I think that's just what you have to do in life. You know, a lot of things are, how do I do X? How do I solve this problem? And you may not do it as efficiently as somebody else can who's an expert in that field, but you know, there's processes around just how do you solve a problem. And with software development, there's always been, I don't want to say magical, but there's always been this thrill of just getting a piece of hardware to do what I want it to do. I've always found that fascinating. Yeah, apprenticeship programs. I know that's come up in other discussions and other places I've heard, and I think that's something that would be nice, but for some reason I feel in this industry it's always been too much about, you know, well, it's computers, it's fast. Like, if somebody came to you and said, okay, to build all these rooms in this house is going to take X amount of dollars, they lay out all the plans, you know, but you can't just like go downstairs and somebody say, you know, cut the wood faster or string the electrical wire faster. You know, they know what they're doing, and I think, yeah, they probably get some pressure sometimes on schedules to go faster, but you also don't want your electrical wiring to blow up your house if it's not done correctly. I think because of computers, it's like, well, that's so fast. Why can't you as a human just go faster? Come on, go faster. And it's all about just, you know, time to market, got to be fast, you know, move fast and break things. That's a phrase I hate so much. You know, yeah, I mean, competitive markets, blah, blah, blah. But I, if I had to pick, I'm always on the side of, you have to make sure that something's working correctly, at least to some degree. You know, so in any event, I think that this career has always been satisfying because there's always something to learn. There's always something. I know nothing about like a GPU or doing tensors or doing, you know, those kinds of calculations. Could I learn it? Yeah. But I don't know that stuff off the top of my head. And that'd be interesting to dive into. That exists so many places. How do cryptographic algorithms work? If you don't know, you could spend a ton of time learning about all that stuff and building skills in that area. So yeah. Anyway, where was I? That was a rant. Not a rant, that was a discussion. A rant would have been different. So I think yeah, so this one I think I've answered the question. And this one I think I've answered the question. Your property name in the filter list and the property by name does not exist in the target type. A hash set would determine uniqueness, but that doesn't really matter because we're just doing it contains. The code that actually does the work, if I go to type system model here, we're bringing it in on get accessible properties here. So we're saying the filtering here, we have is included, and so we're just looking at contains. So if the property was named more than once in that array, we wouldn't care because the contains would still return true. So it's like, not that big of a deal. So I think I'm just going to leave that as is. And if you put one in there that's actually not in the list, that's on you. I you know, oh well, it's too bad, so sad. There's a good 6-hour podcast with Lex Fridman and DHH that talks a lot about these topics. Yeah. At DHH, there's some names in software that give me a little bit of a reaction and not in a positive way. You know, Robert Martin is another name like that. Jonathan Blow is another name. You know, and I'm not saying, like with Jonathan Blow, the video game I played, The Witness, is still one of the best video games I've ever played. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and had a lot of satisfaction in playing that game. I thought it was a very fun puzzle game. And then I started watching, but this was way back in 2014, I think. I started hearing about him, and that he was building this whole new programming language. And so I started watching some of his streams. And yeah, he had a little bit of visceralness to him, a little bit. But, it wasn't too bad. But the more I watched him, the more I'm just like, dude, seriously, it just was a personality that I did not gravitate towards. And it's 2025, and this language still is not available, either free or commercial. It's in beta, but it's still not something that you can use. And I'm kind of like, some people, and I think sometimes it's just personalities. I think it's just the way that people talk and communicate, and their mentalities about things. They just don't jive with me. They don't work with me. So, there may be something with that podcast that can help, but when I see DHH, I kind of shudder a little bit because of some of the opinions he's expressed in the past that I just kind of, I think it's also the sometimes people have, never mind, I'm gonna I think it comes down to, like I said, sometimes just like my personality, some people may find annoying or they don't like. Some people maybe do. I mean, that's where I think I don't like disrespect people like that in the sense of, yeah, they accomplish things. They do things, and if that helps other people, okay. But to me, it's always been, it's not. It is kind of the person, but it's also the material, and it's how you relate to other people. I always want to I'm not saying I do this correctly, but I try to build other people up. I want to try to, inspire other people at the end of the day. The best thing you can do is inspire. What else can you do? I still remember that quote from Neil Peart. And it's stuck with me. Hopefully what you do can inspire others. So, and sometimes, two good people they won't get along as friends, but they have that mutual respect for each other, and they can do this, like Mythbusters. Jamie and the other guy. I forget, I'm blanking on his name. But off the camera, they had a professional respect for each other, but they were not friends. And as soon as the show stopped, they haven't talked to each other, and they're fine with that, and that's okay. So Adam, thank you, Jesus. It's like right there, and I could see the name, and Adam Savage. I could just not think of it. So yeah, and I think they both brought something to the show, and how they approach problems and their personalities, but they were very different people too. You could just see that with how they talked and handled approaching problems and stuff like that. So anyway, with this, I think we're to the point where we're done. I think this issue is there. We now have the ability to filter. Unfortunately, we could not do, like, if I deconstruct test, I'm gonna do that. I wanted to have a way here to provide a method to say, or a name of a method you could call to get the list of included or excluded properties dynamically. It doesn't work because you're getting that information in a source generator, and so you can't necessarily call that method because it's not a method that could actually run yet. It might be part of the compilation. So unfortunately, Jamie, Adam, and Jesus, unfortunately couldn't figure out a way to do that. But at least this gives you the ability now to say, I want to include these, or you could say, I want to exclude all of these properties. for filtering. So yeah, I think we're at a point where this is good. There was a thought that blazed through my head is, what happens if you have on a base type this attribute and you put included on it, but then on a subtype you did excluded? Would the included be done first because they're at that level, and then excluded? This is where you start to get into what ifs with a feature, and you have to start going, well, what am I trying to solve here? Like this just says generate a deconstruct method for me, and for most cases that's fine. This allows me to do some filtering. But if they can be in an inheritance hierarchy, what does that do? I think that's a question for another time. At least I want to close this out. I might put in another issue into GitHub and say address inheritance scenarios. Like, what would happen if you had types with these attributes on them? It could get really confusing. Stop while you still have your sanity. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is a library that's meant to be fun. It's meant to be illustrative. It's not necessary. I mean, I want it to work well for people that do use it, but it's also just it's a vehicle that I also use when I do presentations. If I talk about source generators, I can use this one because it's not too complicated, and people can get their heads around, oh, if I put this attribute on this type, then I can come up here and I automatically get a deconstructor, and I didn't have to write that myself. So that's kind of helpful. So I think at this point I am going to consider this closed. I am going to put an issue just to mention it, but you know, I'll think of that at a later time. So I will close this out off camera, but for this stream I'm going to stop. I am going to be doing a stream sometime today, maybe in another hour or so, I don't know. But my wife and I want to go for a walk this afternoon, and you know, so I don't know if I'm going to do it after I get back, but it's not even 9 o'clock yet, so I might take a little break and finish off Halo 3 ODST this morning. We'll see, but I'm going to do that sometime today. So with that, I am done with this stream. I want to thank everybody who attended. A lot of good conversation. If you are watching this either now or you're watching in the future and you have not subscribed to the channel just yet, please do so. We'd greatly appreciate it. Trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, so any subscription helps. If you've already subscribed, appreciate you for doing that. And with that, I'm going to stop the stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.